Thanks, Andy. So I'm standing in the middle of the street with my hands up. There's 6 guns pointed at me, lights flashing, sirens going, and over the loudspeaker I hear, drop your weapon. I'm wearing black jeans and oversized hoodie and black cotton fingerless gloves with pandas on them. I remember looking at my friends in the distance as they all casually walked away, leaving me standing there in front of 3 police vehicles, plus the one I had just slightly stepped out of. I remember them placing the handcuffs on me and me asking, what did I do? As if it wasn't a big deal that I had just tried to allegedly drive away with a parked police vehicle. At 15 years old, I didn't think it was going to be that big of a deal. This was a pivotal moment in my life. I had a lot of potential to go to jail, maybe again and again, to have a baby, maybe 10, or to end up dead. The way I see it is we all have potential. We're all born with the same amount no matter how you slice it. But the question is, are you willing to commit to that climb? There are 2 types of people in the world. They're the types of people who grow up with the security of knowing that that ladder is there, that the next choice they make is secure, and there are the people who aren't so lucky. There are people that don't even know that there's anything to reach for. This is an important question to ask. And sometimes when we don't have that choice, you have to ask yourself, would your blind commitment to reach for that unknowing supersede the intensity of that fear? Ultimately, it's about making a choice, and only you have the ability to make that choice. I had the ability to walk away from a situation that ended with me being on probation for 2 years. I wasn't a victim, I made a choice. I attribute all of the faculties of potential to having and making a choice. When I was young, I often heard people talk about their struggles. There was chaos and there was complacency, and it was always someone else's fault. So I learned early on that I needed to take agency over my own choices. I could create the life that I want with the potential that I had, but was I willing? My dad always said, be prepared for life, in this really daunting Mexican Sean Connery tone of voice. Words from a man who immigrated to this country to create a better life for himself and his future family. He wanted to follow his heart and his dreams. And this could have been taken in 2 different ways, and really it kind of just depended on his mood. So it was either be prepared because life is hard and it's all about the struggle, right? It's all about your life being hard, so you have to be prepared. And the other was be prepared because this life can make your dreams come true if you are willing to do the work. Ultimately, my ability to define potential for myself helped save my life. When I was young, I always had this dream that I would live a life full of love and support without all the chaos and all the tension that surrounded me. I wanted to believe that there was a power greater than myself that was all-encompassing, that supported me unconditionally. I was raised Catholic, so fear and guilt was embedded into my DNA. I looked around and saw all the chaos and the struggle and had a zero desire to change it because, well, if it's God's will. I hate to say this, but the people closest to me were not the most positive and uplifting bunch. We were surrounded by gang violence, drug use, neglect, and death. I felt completely unsupported by the world around me. I felt unseen and insignificant. I knew that if I could just make the best choices for myself, I would be able to be free from being in this heavy state full of tension. I kept hearing about this potential but had yet to find its true origin or how this potential was going to serve me in some way. Teachers at school would always tell me how much potential I had and how I was meant to do great things in the world. And I wondered if this was fueling my faith to continue to reach for that invisible rung. When I was in the 6th grade, Tony Plana, a Cuban actor, director whose movies we knew from Zoot Suit and Born in East LA, came to our class to do a reading It must have been a favor for our friend or for our teacher, a community service type of thing. And I remember it was so cool to see a Latin actor talk about his struggle and overcoming adversity and creating this really successful career. He did a few autographs, and I remember him writing in my notebook in big, bold letters, "Dream on." I held on to that piece of paper as long as I can remember. I began to feel the truth of those words the more time went on, the more my desire grew to continue to move forward. So the potential was to break the norm, to get to a place where I could cultivate something bigger, something more purposeful. The desire was to do better than the people around me so that I could help those around me and get out of this belief system that we're all stuck and that the world is a terrible place filled with pain and suffering, and that's just the way shit is. The hard work was to find a way to stay out of trouble long enough to make the best choices and to believe that I was worth something, that I meant something, that one day I would maybe be able to reach for that potential and ultimately find my purpose. So here's why yoga is fucked up. I was introduced to yoga as a philosophy by the Self-Realization Center in Hollywood. My mom was having a self-development phase, and I happened to go check it out with her. I learned about yoga as a way of life way before I learned about its physical component. I thought it was so interesting, this idea of us being responsible for our own happiness. And not only was that the belief, but the belief was also that finding our happiness was our duty. I began to practice, and over the years, I used it as a tool to continue my journey onward. My desire to not go to jail made it possible for me to have the grades to go to college. I got a job managing a hair salon in West Hollywood where I was mentored by a really great businessman and met the future love of my life, who's in here somewhere, I think. I realized that my potential was my ability to continue to move forward and to forge forward and to just continue to climb. As the time went on, I began to use this practice as more of a spiritual and mental sanctuary. I did my first yoga teacher training. I decided to become a teacher, and I wanted to bring this to underprivileged communities so that it could serve them in the same way that it had served me. I began studying with the teacher and really began to learn the depths of this practice. I finally got to a place in my life where I was like, holy shit, I did it. Made it. But that's when shit really hit the fan. You see, yoga means union. Yoga is about making the stuff that is unconscious conscious. Yoga is about the unraveling, and sometimes the unraveling doesn't feel so nice. Yoga invites us to not bypass the darkness, but to move through it in a way to understand that its presence is also a part of us. So here I was, a young girl from East Los Angeles who grew up during the LA riots living in Hollywood with this like really prestigious job with tons of responsibility, thinking, didn't I already do all the hard work? I mean, I've seen someone get shot. Like, what could be worse? I'll tell you what's worse. How disconnected we can be. How in the process of that self-work, we can become so disconnected from our people, from what's really going on in the world. Right now, we're in a room full of people, some strangers, but we're all here together. There's some thread that is binding us. There is potential for connection, potential for disconnection. So if you turn to the person next to you, maybe the other person next to you, this is a weird thing when you're like facing the front. Turn to a person next to you and maybe give them a little smile or a wink or a nod. Just acknowledge them. Don't get in trouble. That's a person, there's life there. This person has potential, there's a story there. It took you a second to acknowledge that, yet the feeling of being seen by someone can change the course of that person's day or even life. I wasn't able to reach for my potential on my own. We need our tribe, we need our people to help move us up. I was able to create a framework that worked for me because I chose to believe that I wouldn't fall, that I would not fail, that I wasn't destined to be stuck, and that my dreams were not fleeting. I could have chosen to go to jail, to live a life in the system, to live up to the predispositions of my environment or my socioeconomic inheritance, to live under the numbing of drugs and alcohol, to be an overweight, depressed, anxious teenager on medication, but I made a choice. The choice was to be better and to do better. My teacher, Yoga Rupa Rod Stryker, says, if you powerfully believe in the value that you have to offer the world, your love and passion for it will be an unstoppable force. Today, I've become the first person in my family to travel the world, to have my own business. I get to work with people as a yoga teacher trainer, as a life coach, as a podcast host. I get to work with some of the world's top NBA athletes, NFL players, at-risk youth, Afghan vets. I get to do what I love because I chose to commit to my potential. Andrew Carnegie said, you cannot push anyone up a ladder unless he be willing to climb a little himself. Thank you.